What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 342. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line from 100-degree Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. LSV, how's your day?
Well, you just said it was 100 degrees, so...
That's insane.
Yeah, it's pretty hot out right now. Other than that, things are good, though. Things are good. I'm fresh off a VSL victory. No big deal.
It was a sweet win, too, by the way. I did watch that, and anybody who's interested in watching the Vintage Super League, you can find it on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. on twitch.tv/magic, and you can watch Luis and a bunch of other sicko Hall of Famers battle it out in Vintage if you're into that. It's it's kind of a forgotten format. Not that many people play it. But Vintage Super League doing a good job of keeping the profile alive. And you had a sweet one against Menendian tonight. Speaking of sweet ones, got a sweet show lined up for you today. We're going to do a level up show, everybody's favorite. And this one is on preparation. Before we get into all that, I got a little housekeeping here. First up, channelfireball.com. That's right. You know them, the sponsors of the show, and for good reason. We love Channel Fireball. They give you free content. They want to help you improve at Magic as much as we do. And while you're there, hey, you can pick up any singles you need to fill out, any decks, any sealed product to get some booster drafts or practice going on, which is something we're going to be talking about quite a bit on the show this week. And you can even sell your cards back to them. And if you want to sell them for store credit, you'll get a 30% bonus that you can use to get more packs or singles or whatever. And the circle of life continues. Also, supplies, they've got those as well, including Limited Resources supplies. You can find LR sleeves and deck boxes in stock right now, as well as t-shirts. The Patreon, the other way you can support the show, you can do it directly via the Patreon. It's an easy service to sign up for. You can also quit anytime you want. You can set a monthly limit. You can set any limit that you'd like per show, and you get some cool bonuses, including a thank you card in the mail and the ability to ask a question of the week, which we have here. This one comes from Ted Meyer. He says, hey, how do you change your drafting at a table with less than 8 drafters? What do you change when drafting with 6, 5, or maybe even 4 players in a draft? What does change, Luis, when you, sometimes the local shop can't quite get up to 8 to fire a full 8-person queue, and you end up drafting with 6. That's a pretty common one, if you're doing the teams thing, or sometimes even 5, or you just have 4 friends and you really want to play limited and you end up doing that.
Well, there's not huge differences. You can draft with 7, you can draft with 6, 5, 4, less than 4, and you should start looking at other ways to play Magic. But when you draft with an odd number, someone will get a bye. That's not the end of the world. You draft with 7, you have 3 matches of 2 players each, and someone gets a bye. One of the most enjoyable draft formats is with 6. It's a team draft where 3-on-3 teams where you alternate people from each team. So you've got all this counterplay of hate drafting. It's actually good in teams and trying to figure all that out. But you can also just do normal drafts with 6 players or 5 players. The biggest difference in terms of what you should be looking for in the draft is that synergy decks get worse because there's just fewer cards open. So you're going to see fewer copies of the important cards and more you're just drafting for just individual card quality. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't discourage you from doing drafts with fewer than 8 players. There's plenty you can get done with less, and it's just still a lot of fun.
All right. Speaking of the Patreon, Luis, we've got a giveaway to do here. Now, you guys know that when we open up Crack-A-Packs here on the podcast, we give away all the cards to you, our patrons, our supporters, along with a bunch of other stuff. I've got a couple of other things coming down the pipe here for some giveaways, kind of to celebrate hitting that last goal as I work my way up to figuring out what the next goal should be and start getting the ball rolling on that kind of stuff. This one's got an Archangel Avacyn in it. It's also got a Nahiri in here, and there's a bunch of other kind of, random stuff, a couple of Triskaidekaphobias, Silver for Partisan, that kind of stuff. A foil Highland Lake. Can I interest you in that at all, Luis?
You cannot, but...
Okay. How about Athalia's Lieutenant? Have you ever heard that, Lieutenant?
I have heard it,
yeah,
but I don't really know what it means. Is it a British term?
It is a British term. It's just how they say lieutenant. The more you know. Patreon winner for this one, they're going to get all of those cards that I just mentioned, plus all the other ones in this packet here. They're also going to get some LR sleeves, the new ones, and an LR pin and an LR sticker. And if I have a t-shirt left, which I will look, I will also include that. This one's going to go to Ben Sweezy, which is a sweet name. That sounds like a rapper or something. And Ben comes from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Ben, for being a patron. That's all you got to do to be entered in these. You're entered automatically if you are a patron. It doesn't matter what level you're at. You are in there. And this one's going to go to Ben. And we're going to start reseeding the pile here. And why don't we get to that right now, Luis, with, that's right, an Eternal Masters booster pack. I purchased this pack with you, actually, at the Pike Place Market in downtown Seattle when we were out and about. Yep. It was not cheap. These packs are...
No, the shops at Pike Place Market are definitely...
Don't do that. I knew you were going to do that. All right, hopefully we'll get something awesome to give away to our
I've started to draft Eternal Masters, so I've got some thoughts on the format.
Ooh, I have 2, actually. I've done 3 drafts now. And I ran the numbers, by the way, Luis. Over under number of Mana Wars I've averaged per deck, the over under is 3.5.
I will take the under.
You missed.
All right.
It's 3.66.
The keys to Eternal Masters draft, not drafting four Mana Wars per deck.
I took one over Force of Will. That was funny. Squadron Hawk is the first one out.
So I do like Squadron Hawks. This is 1 and a white for a 1/1 flyer that when you play it, when it enters the battlefield, you get to search your deck for up to 3 more Squadron Hawks.
Yeah, usually, or
I guess technically you can just keep getting them, right?
No, it is actually, it does stipulate.
Yeah, but 3, even if you have 6, the second Squadron Hawk can go.
This is a place to do it in limited. Card's good.
I wouldn't want to first pick it, but this is a powerful card. This is the kind of card you really want to pay attention to. Like, we'll probably pass this Squadron Hawk, but then if you see a 5th pick Squadron Hawk, might be worth taking it, because once you have 2, the card is good. I mean, we got to play with this card in, was it like M12 or something, M11? No, I guess it was like M12 or M13. One of those formats, whichever core set it was in, and it was quite good in draft. If you got 2 of them, it was good. If you got 3 or 4, it was great.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because it's not, over the top powerful. It was from M11, it seems. It's just this kind of grindy, there's a card advantage element to it where if you can utilize cards in your hand, it can help with that. And, one of the things that you do have to realize is that a 1/1 flyer is a card. Now, maybe it's 3/4 of a card or whatever you want to call it, but when you're getting it in addition to others, a 1/1 flying spirit token, a Squadron Hawk, like those cards matter. Like these are things that actually affect the board, can be very annoying. They can carry equipment. They can chip away in the air. They can chump block. They're pretty disposable. If they ever trade for a real card, it's like you're trading 1/4 of a card if you end up with 4 of them for 1 whole card from your opponent. And these things actually come together sometimes. Plague Witch is next. It's 1 and a black for a 1/1 elf spell shaper. The hell is that? You can pay black, tap it, and discard a card to give target creature -1/-1 till end of turn.
Plague Witch is not a great card.
It's not that great.
She's got some utility, but
yeah, not a big fan. Desperate Ravings. I like this one. 1 and a red instant, draw 2, then discard a card at random, and it has flashback for 2 and a blue.
Well, given that 2 of my 3 drafts I've been blue-red and I haven't lost any matches with it yet, yeah, I like Desperate Ravings. It is
that was a tough sell.
It's card advantage in a format that has a lot of powerful cards, and it plays quite nicely with other cards in this color. Like Burning Vengeance is one of them, but even just like other discard effects and that sort of thing is quite good. Young Pyromancer, that sort of thing.
So I got a story about Desperate Ravings. I was playing in a draft against Hall of Famer Frank Karsten. And I had a Mana War, I know you're shocked, on the battlefield, and he had 2 Squadron Hawks. And he's like, go to attack. So I'm like, sure. He's like, attack with both Squadron Hawks. I'm like, before blocks. He's like, okay. And I'm like, Desperate Ravings. Now I look down at my hand. I've got 4 cards in my hand, or 3 cards in my hand, and one of them's Wonder. And I'm like, just the once. And so I draw the 2 and I shuffle it up. And of course, I'm like, do you just want to point to one? And I mean, this is Frank Karsten. He doesn't just want to point to a card to make it random. He's got some, app or something in his head that he can randomize the cards. And he's like, this one. And I put in the bin and it's Wonder. I'm like, block. He's like, really? I'm like, we did it. And I got to gobble up one of his Squadron Hawks. So
yeah. So Wonder's a 2/2 flyer that if it's in your graveyard and you have an island, all your creatures are flying.
Yeah,
so
it's sweet.
It's a sweet card. I like Wonder.
Artwork on this next one's great. Seal of Strength. Noah Bradley artwork here. He's one of the best Magic artists, period, and he also drew Elmer on this. It's green for an enchantment, and you can sacrifice it to give target creature +3/+3 until end of turn. Super Elmer.
Pretty reasonable card. I wouldn't fault you for wanting to take Seal of Strength over Desperate Ravings. I'm probably in the Desperate Ravings camp right now.
Really? Are they even in the same ballpark?
I think that the green aggressive decks are good, and this isn't good in the enchantment deck.
Man, I have Seal of Strength, just not even on my radar. Warden of Evos Isle, 2 and a blue, 2/2 flyer, and creature spells with flying you cast costs 1 less to cast.
I haven't quite gotten into the blue-white flyers yet, or even I don't know. I haven't really seen it. So I'm kind of off the Warden, but it also seems okay.
Yeah, that's how I am too. I'm not like super stoked. It used to be an uncommon. It's a common here. I like this next one, Twisted Abomination, 6 mana for a 5/3 zombie mutant. You can pay a black to regenerate it, and it's got swamp cycling, so you can pay 2 colorless and discard this, and then go get a swamp out of your library and put it in your hand.
True story. This was a huge part of block constructed. It was a very constructed playable card.
Oh, really? What block was that?
Onslaught block.
That
was the first block I played competitively. And in fact, my first PTQ was Onslaught block constructed. Lost to David Ochoa playing for top 8, funnily enough.
Did either of you play Twisted Abomination?
Nope. But it was a very played card. Which is funny because you put this card in the standard right now, and I don't think it would see a ton of play, but
probably not. It is very flexible.
In any case, it's a good card in draft. See, this is the thing about Eternal Master Draft. I see a lot of possibilities here, and I'm not, maybe 7 or 8 more drafts in, I'll have stronger opinions. But right now, all these cards seem like plausible places to start. I'm not seeing anything that's huge leaps above in power level.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Next is Monk Idealist, 2 and a white for a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you return target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. That's a very specific card for a very specific deck. Yeah. Reckless Charge is next. Card I've never really liked, but I feel like in the back of my head I might be underappreciating. It's red for a sorcery. Target creature gets +3/+0 and gains haste until end of turn, and you can flash it back for 2 and a red. Is this card better than I think it is? I just always pass it by.
I don't think it's very good, so I would pass on Reckless Charge. It just doesn't seem like it does enough.
Confidence, Marshall. Have confidence. Deep Analysis. This is one I like. 3 and a blue. Target player draws 2 cards at sorcery speed for flashback. 1 and a blue and pay 3 life. Insane. I love that card.
Deep Analysis is quite good. I would take Deep Analysis here.
I would too. Rugged Highlands is the red-green duel. We're not taking that here. Ooh, uncommons. Necrotol.
All right, Necrotol is worth taking. This is a 2 black for a 2/1 first strike, and when it enters the battlefield, it kills a non-artifact, non-black creature, and
it can't be regenerated.
Yes, this is a solid 2 for 1. And a 2/1 first strike's a real card too. Like
definitely,
you can win some combats with 2/1 first strikes.
Totally, yeah. I'm a big fan of Necrotol. For me, it would be between that and Deep Analysis right now. Let's see what else we have before we make the decision. Next is Extract from Darkness, which is 3 black, blue for a sorcery. Each player mills the top 2 cards of their library, and then put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control.
This is a very powerful card. I've had it played against me, and the only reason I'd hesitate to take it is that it's a multicolor card, and I'm not really looking to start on a multicolor card here.
I agree. Wall of Omens. Love this guy. 1 and a white for a 0/4. Wall with Defender. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card.
Can't fault Wall of Omens, but I would probably still just take Deep Analysis.
I know. I would too. I like Wall of Omens a lot, but where does it go, right? Like,
yeah, I think in the black-white, like Blink Reanimate.
The Blink deck for sure. Maybe it's
probably
good
fine
enough in the flyer deck, yeah.
But overall, I would rather have something like Deep Analysis, which is just a 4/1 by itself, has good synergy with Discard, it has good synergy with Burning Vengeance. It just does a lot of different things. It's good in blue-green that's like milling itself with Commune.
Yes.
So lots of options and reasons to take Deep Analysis.
Yeah, I like that card. We have a foil, of course. It's Abundant Growth, so not exactly a home run for the value, but it's a reasonable card. It's green for an aura and a chance of land. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and then Enchanted Land has tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Not taking it here, though. We do get a rare, a sweet one, Enlightened Tutor. Well, with great artwork, too.
This is a 1 white for a instant, and you can search your library for an artifact or enchantment, put it on top of your deck.
Yes.
A powerful constructed card, not
Indeed.
So much in limited.
Yeah, not a big fan of it in limited. I'm still down to Deep Analysis and Necrotol, and I think we all know I'm taking Deep Analysis here.
Yeah, I think I would too, though I wouldn't be surprised if Necrotol was better. So
it's format dependent.
Yeah, and like I said, we're still kind of early exploration phases. The fact that Deep Analysis is splashable and only single color is a point in its favor.
Yeah, it also just goes in the type of deck that I think I want to play. I've played blue, black, red, blue, and red, blue. Those are the 3 archetypes that I've played so far, and Deep Analysis fits quite cleanly into all of those. So that's probably why I would take it. I mean, whatever. You don't get to do that many EMA drafts. It's not going to be out forever. Yeah, and I'll start doing that too. I'll probably do some videos of it, but still, you got to play what you like if you're only going to get a few drafts in.
For sure.
Okay, let's get into our main topic here, Luis. Preparing for a tournament. This is a topic that is a very practical use, right? This is the type of thing that isn't as much theory as it is as much like, I've got Luis Scott-Vargas as my co-host. You've been testing for Magic tournaments for years, and this is something that we can really leverage your skill set.
Well, I usually don't test for the same tournament for years. It's usually a shorter time frame.
Thank you for that. I said tournaments, and so we're gonna go deep here and figure out what it is that people need to do to best prepare, because the way I'm envisioning this, Luis, is like, most of our listener base is not on the Pro Tour, right? That's just a numbers game. But a lot of our listener base plays the bigger tournaments that come to their area, right? A GP comes to town, a big open tournament or something like that, and they're going to go play it. And maybe some of them will travel, right? You'll travel for GPs. I know we have listeners that travel for GPs as well. And, when that tournament does come rolling around, you're not going to want to just show up, right? You're not just going to want to show up with, a few weeks after the pre-release or something and just hope everything works out. You're going to want to put in some work and really try to get an edge on the field by play testing and practicing and preparing and such. And so we're going to talk about how to do that, because it isn't necessarily straightforward, and there's some wrinkles that you need to iron out if you're going to maximize on your testing. So where should we start, Luis?
Well, first of all, I do want to make clear that this isn't limited to just a Grand Prix or just like an Open or just an RPTQ. This is basically a way to go walk through the steps to prepare for any tournament that matters to you. And that is a PPTQ, that is a game day, that is a local tournament, that is a Magic Online PTQ or Magic Online Championship Series. Oh, yeah. The number of tournaments, types of tournaments you could name just will be here forever. And we just want to make sure that it's clear that this is just how you can apply this to any tournament that you're going to.
Okay.
And we're going to focus on sealed and draft, since that's kind of what this podcast is about. I wouldn't be surprised if you and Eric wanted to kind of maybe tackle this for constructed resources at some point as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of this that's going to be cross-applicable, and a few things that apply to constructed that don't to limited. So, yeah, we might want to do that.
All right, so this is going to be, we're going to walk you through step by step here, and I'll talk about the things that I've done that have worked well for me. You can do the same.
Mm-hmm. So, and then I've got a bunch of questions at the end to kind of rapid fire at you, putting myself in the seat of the listener and trying to kind of tie up any loose ends. So we'll do that after the main part.
So step 1, and we're going to go through not only with steps, but also like kind of a check-in at the end of each step to see like where you're at, or where ideally you're at the end of this step, because this is kind of like chronological. So step 1 is familiarizing yourself with the format, and that at the base level just means knowing the cards. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've gotten the question from someone who doesn't really know Magic, like, do you know all the cards?
Right.
And
it's so funny.
And the answer is no, you don't know all 15,000 cards, but the answer is pretty much yes. You know all 250 cards in the latest set, like you do.
Yep.
You know what every single Shadows over Innistrad card does at this point.
Right.
You don't know that immediately. So how do you start? The first place to start, in my opinion, would be set reviews. I think set reviews are a good place to kind of get a 2-for-1. 2-for-1s are good. And also, this is a 2-for-1. So we get to promote our set reviews or the ones I write for Channel Fireball. I think that's some kind of synergy or a killer app.
Definitely.
But in all seriousness, the reason that reading set reviews is useful is that you just start getting familiar with the cards. You start, the art. The art's really important, because your goal by the end of this, and we'll check in on that later, is when your opponent plays a card, you don't read it. You don't, ask what that is. You just know what the card is. Mm-hmm. You glance over at the table, so you don't want to use your mental energy trying to figure out what the cards are doing. That's where you start, and that's what step 1 is. And step 1, the set reviews help because you can start getting opinions on the cards. And I'm by no means claiming our opinions are, correct and we nailed the format. It's more like, what are people thinking about this? What am I thinking about this? Like, you should start thinking about it too. So, you're mostly just trying to get your surface level opinions of the card, and so your goal is not to solve everything here. The goal is to just start learning what the cards do. So the check-in for step one is you know a lot of the cards in the set. You don't know all of them. You're starting to recognize them. The louder ones, like you probably know what Avacyn does because she's so loud, even though you're not going to play against her all that often. You're starting to get used to what the common removal is, the common tricks, and you're putting some thought towards how the cards interact, but you really won't be learning that until later because it's hard to really tell that from just looking at a list of cards.
Right.
And so step one is before you've shuffled a single card. Step one is you're trying to get yourself into the mode of like, what do all the cards in this set do? And that leads into kind of step 1B, which is just play the pre-release. I would highly encourage you to play the pre-release. It's just a lot of fun. And it's great to be able to play the cards in a format where no one else has played the cards either. So you're all kind of just like getting through it together.
Yeah, for sure.
We definitely like pre-releases and think they're fun to play at. But this tournament guide's also not time dependent because sometimes you realize like, oh wow, they're the RPTQ is sealed and it's months after the sets come out. So but you didn't know you were going to it until like a month ahead of time or a month and a half ahead of time. So the set's already been out for a while, so the pre-release doesn't necessarily factor in. So step 2 is dive in, and we'll talk about both sealed and draft here. And this is the meatiest step. This is where you play. This is where you start getting reps in, and there's a lot more to it than that, but the base level is trying to wrap your mind and get yourself into the format. So for sealed, well, the best way to practice sealed is to build sealed decks. There's a lot of different ways to do that. The first one would be play local sealed tournaments. These aren't particularly efficient. That's the biggest strike they have against them.
Sure.
You've got a local, it's like my local store is running a Shadows of Innistrad Sealed, starts at 10 a.m. We're going to play 5 rounds and cut to top 8, or we're going to play 6 rounds of Swiss. You built one sealed deck, and then you spent 9 hours at the shop. And that's fine. It's a fun way to spend a Saturday. We're not saying don't do this, but in terms of tournament prep, if you're someone on budgeted time, and we do want to talk about that specifically because we understand you don't have 70 hours to test for a tournament. That's just not how most people's lives work.
Yeah, I was going to say that's almost a declarative sentence, right? Like you are somebody on budgeted time if you're preparing for a tournament.
Yeah, and that being said, playing a local sealed tournament is not as often going to give you as many reps as some of the other options we're going to talk about here. So one way to get more value out of it is go with your friends. I'd always recommend going to Magic tournaments with friends anyway because it's just a lot of fun. And what you can do is you can compare sealed pools. You each build your sealed, and then afterwards you go look and see like, this is why I did this is why I did that. And you get to root for your friends, and maybe someone does great. Awesome. The second is kind of cutting out the middleman there. It's set up practice with your friends. So you collectively like buy a box, or you each have your own packs, and you meet and you play sealed. So what you do is you work on the sealed pools together, and that means either you each open your own sealed, you build your sealed, and then you kind of like swap or have other people look at them. And, you have to be talking during the whole time. You have to be like, well, here's why I went blue-green, and here's why I didn't play this card, and this is why I wanted to splash, or this is why I didn't want to splash. And you talk about, well, I actually think that the extra removal spell in black is so important, so you really need to play that over the red. Mm-hmm. You can also build collaboratively the whole time. So, like, if you had 4 people, all 4 of you build the first deck, and all 4 of you build the second deck, and the third deck, and the fourth.
Now, did you mean that all together?
Yes.
Simultaneously, or did you mean I build it, and then I shuffle it up, hand it to you, you build it, and then we all compare where we ended up?
Both are good. Okay. So one way to do it is you each 4 individually build your own deck, and then you just like swap. Mm-hmm. And so see what other people did, or you all 4 as a group build the first deck, and then all and
talk it out and all that stuff. Deck.
And in both cases, you should be discussing a lot because that's really what you're trying to get done here. And then play with the decks. Mm-hmm. Play some games, switch them around. The goal here is to learn. I mean, you can take joy from crushing your friends. I would not say there's anything wrong with that. But the goal, this isn't. When we would practice like this, we wouldn't have like prizes or keep track of records. Really, this is more just like let's play some games, let's build some decks, and the building part is more important because it is important to play Magic well. It's a hard game to play well, trust me, but it is. But if you're trying to prepare for a sealed tournament, the sealed part is a very big part of that.
Okay.
Another way is to play sealed leagues on Magic Online. These are very fast, very efficient, and you can like swap between decks. You can save multiple decks. So if you don't know if you want to play blue, green, or black, white, you can just save both and then switch between them very easily.
Yeah, the building part of that's really nice too, because you can just save infinite different builds and get like clean snapshots. Because in real life, it is hard to compare decks side by side just because there's a lot of overlap usually. And on Magic Online, it's nice to be able to just click over and say, really which one has a better curve? What am I looking at here? And make comparisons from build to build specifically.
But you're not escaping from discussion here either. At least not if you're doing it right. You should to talk with your friends.
Yeah.
You should share screenshots, discuss why you're building these sealed decks, or ask for opinions. The LRcast subreddit usually has a couple active threads where people are like, here's sealed deck thread, and people will post their seals and other people will talk about them. And the great thing about that is you get value whether you're the person posting it and realizing why people would do the things they do, or the person commenting on it on the other side, which is because when you say like, I would do such and such and such and such, you're thinking about this deck, you're getting the value of building it, and other people will respond with like, oh, what I think this. So all that stuff's really good. And if you've noticed a common theme here, it's that this isn't a solitary exercise, and it's not an exercise that happens where you're just like playing. It's mostly like, if I had to put number one, it'd be discussion. So, so this is a really big part of the way you prepare. And don't get me wrong, there's playing and doing your own thing within all of these categories, but to get the max value, you have to get other perspectives too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely critical part of the process.
Another is sealed deck simulators. There's a lot of websites that will generate sealed decks for you.
You like these? Are these worth it? Are these a thing?
I don't use them because you don't get to play with the deck.
And
without jumping through a lot of hoops. So,
do you worry about the fact that they're not real packs and that real packs do have collation patterns to them? Yeah,
there's some concern to that, but these are also efficient and they're also free. So, okay. I think that they're a reasonable thing to think about.
Like better than nothing status? Is that fair to say?
Well,
or are they better than that too?
I would believe someone if they said, I really like these and I use them a lot and they're good. Okay. I just happen to prefer Magic Online, but again, when we're talking about budgeting time, there's also budgeting money.
Yep,
it's not free to join a sealed league, and I don't want to claim that money is no object, because that's just not how the world works.
Right.
So that's how I would kind of handle like step 2 for sealed. It's a bunch of different ways to build sealed decks, a bunch of different methods to discuss them, and a bunch of different ways to kind of practice, and the practice is part of it. You should be playing out the cards too. So, for draft, it's similar. There are a couple differences. First one, you can draft at a store. There's less commitment here than a sealed tournament, so I don't have any recommendation against drafting at a store. It takes a couple hours. That's how long drafts take. And as usual, you can go to the people at your local store. The people you go there with. Another advantage of draft versus practicing with just your friends, like for sealed, is that when you draft with people you don't know, then you get new information. You get like a new draft pool. One of the downsides, and actually we run into this a lot for Pro Tour testing, is when we have like the same 8 people doing the drafts over and over again.
Oh yeah.
Then you start like, oh, I know that this person drafts this way, so I'm not going to draft that. And that actually does taint results, because when you draft in the tournament, you're drafting with essentially random people.
I've seen that happen actually quite a bit with the Pro Tour testing teams, where they had done a ton of drafts, 40 to 50 drafts or something insane, but then afterwards weren't really happy with their draft record. And that was definitely one of the things that I heard a lot of people point to, was the fact that like maybe it was just a little bit too in-house, and we weren't prepared for what the rest of the world were how they would draft. Because when you have that groupthink going on, right, where everybody decides that this common is the best, or that this color pair is the best, and everybody's kind of fighting over it, you might even be correct. This is the weird thing, is that you might even be right, but the testing gets different. It feels different than when you draft with people who don't know the things that you know. Also, if you're wrong, then it can really screw you up. But I find that really a very difficult problem to address for those teams that are actually able to put in a ton of testing. I think that, for your average Magic player, it's probably not so big of a deal, because you're really just trying to get your sea legs under you. We're not, there aren't that many groups out there that can put in, 20, 30, 40 drafts before a tournament. But it is interesting to note that even, in the early stages, it will start affecting it.
And that's one of the reasons I think going to a local store instead of just drafting with the same people has an advantage.
Yeah, for sure.
Though, that next point is, in fact, drafting with those people. It's drafting with your friends. And first of all, this is just a ton of fun. Drafting with friends is one of the ways I got more into Magic. So
it's just the best.
It is just awesome. You're like, you'll have a barbecue, you hang out, you do some drafts. Like, we still do this when new sets come out.
Yeah, it's just fun. I mean, it's just nice.
So, and here, have you on the discussion, like, afterwards discuss the draft? Don't during the draft, just draft normal. Like, you don't want to mess up the draft, but afterwards, like, take note or even take a picture with your phone, like interesting packs or picks, and talk about, like, hey, what would you take here? Another thing that I've found helps testing when you're testing with your friends is splitting into random teams after the draft.
Okay.
Kind of funny that the Patreon question actually kind of touched on this, but if you have 6 or 8 people, let's say you do the draft like normal, so not a team draft. Like, you draft as if it was 8 individual people. And then afterwards, just randomly split the people into 2 4-on-4 teams. And the advantage of that is that you can just talk with your teammates as you all build your deck at the same time, because you're not playing against them, so you can all help each other build your deck, and then you play against the other team.
Yeah, this is how we do all of our coverage drafts. And this is part of the reason for it, is that we all feel like we learn more about the format. And oftentimes that's, we're drafting for fun and for camaraderie, but also because it's really important to get your hands on the cards. Like, for me, going into the booth, for example, me getting a chance to actually play a few drafts out versus not is a big difference for my preparedness level, right? And if I can even bounce ideas off of people and say, hey, you've played black-white, what are the cards I should look out for here? And now all of a sudden the information's flowing around and you can get a lot more out of it. I actually just think that's my preferred way to just draft in general. And it is particularly applicable to when you're trying to learn at the beginning of a format.
Agreed. And I'm a huge fan of it. It's really not very complicated, and you just play normal games of Magic. You just happen to be split up into random teams so that you get more access to information kind of for free.
Yeah.
So another way to practice draft on Magic Online. It's super efficient. You get to draft at any time of the day. There's no setup costs besides the actual cost of entry, and you get to do it from the comfort of your own home. Again, you don't escape discussion. You can discuss with your friends while doing so. You can use like Skype or TeamViewer or well, maybe not TeamViewer. I think they actually had some serious security problems recently, so I retract that.
We will not recommend that.
But yeah,
but you're totally right. I mean, we've heard. I was listening to the MTG Pro Tutor podcast, and I know that Jake Mondello, who's kind of a young up and coming player, he actually got a bunch of Mike Sigrist's time, and what they did is they got on Skype and they drafted for like 8 or 10 hours straight. And they would even have a loop where they would watch each other draft, and then while they were playing their match, the other person would draft and the other person would be giving feedback, and they just ground it out. And I just thought, well, that is so cool. You mentioned earlier as well, social media is great for stuff like this too. You can start a Facebook group with your testing team, or like you said as well, the LR subreddit is a great place to throw screenshots up and say, hey, this is what I came up with. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I do a kind of modified version of that when I stream, where I join a draft and then I draft and submit the deck, and then I join another draft. And then
it's just only you.
Yeah, I'm not discussing it. I'm just drafting.
You're not discussing it, and there's nobody else involved. But yeah, it is a little modified version.
Well, I'm actually a big proponent of playing with friends on Skype. We do this when we're testing for tournaments all the time. Like, it's just efficient, and that way you can have someone, because again, the draft is like really the hardest part. So you can have someone Skype in for a draft, and then maybe they stick around while you play the matches, maybe not, but it's still you're both getting the value of that draft at the same time. So it's a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of that sort of thing, but you also have other options in terms of draft too. And I know some people are a fan of like repacks, like they get all the cards, and then after the draft, they collect all the cards and distribute them into packs. So this is kind of like the sealed deck generator, where you can also use draft pack generators online. All of these things have the collation issues that I'm somewhat wary of, and for draft, it matters a lot. So I don't think we're fully on board with that, or at least we don't use it.
Yep.
Here's one I was actually not sure whether to include, because I don't want to steer people the wrong way, though we have mentioned it on the podcast before. If you're practicing for a draft tournament, like let's say you're like, wow, I managed to qualify for an RPTQ, the top 8 is draft, and if I end up top 8ing, I'll want to know how to draft, but I don't have very much time. I can only do a couple drafts. You can force the same deck 5. Like if you knew you had to play a draft tournament, you only had 5. You could only do 5 drafts beforehand. Forcing the same deck like 4 or 5 times will give you a lot more knowledge about that deck. You're kind of locking yourself into drafting that deck in the actual drafts that matter, but you'll at least have, very high level knowledge of that deck when the time comes.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I don't want to recommend this like wholesale is that this goes against what we're trying to teach you overall, which is understanding the format and being open and flexible and being able to draft the open colors. Short term, it is a good way to learn a deck, and it is a good way to put yourself in a good position to win in a specific draft. So
yeah, I agree.
I have seen people do that with Pro Tours before. It's like, well, I know I can't test, but I can force mono red, or I can force blue green over and over again, and then I will have like expert level on blue green, even though the goal is to be expert level on all the archetypes. So, So yeah, you use that tool, but just be aware of its drawbacks. So, what are we trying to do with this step? What are we trying to do? We're trying to learn how to build sealed decks. We're trying to learn how to draft. We're trying to play with the cards, and your goals here are learning the cards and learning the format. And those are 2 separate things. Learning the format is like learning how the cards interact and what decks are good. Learning the cards is kind of getting to the point where you have unconscious mastery of all the cards. You don't have to actively think to know what the cards are doing. And once you get to the real pinnacle of this, you don't really have to run through a list of like what they could have. You just kind of know what they have without thinking about it very much.
Yeah. And that happens quicker and quicker the more you iterate on this whole idea, right? This whole process happens over and over again, and you'll start to pick that kind of stuff up quicker.
And going back to how much time you have, if you don't have tons of time, focus more on the deck building and discussion parts. You should try to kick games in. I mean, that's just good practice. But the deck building and discussion parts for both sealed and draft are going to really pay a lot of dividends. I mean, you don't want to lose sight of. You do also have to just mechanically be good at Magic, and the way to do that is practice. But I'm trying to approach this from the perspective of like, yeah, I play a good amount of Magic. I know what I'm doing. I've got this specific sealed tournament, and I want to maximize my chances in that tournament. And talking about how you should build your decks and building a lot of decks is going to give you more mileage than just practicing, just playing the decks. Like if you had 100, like if you were to divide your time, most people, like let's say the way you practice sealed was you played Magic Online Leagues and maybe you went to a couple local tournaments. You'd be spending 10% of your time deck building and 90% of your time playing the matches. If you can get that to like 50-50, I think you're going to get it way better. And the way to do that is build a lot of decks you're not going to play with or play one match with. And that's one of the big reasons I actually like testing with your friends is that the 4 of you can build 4 sealed decks and then play like a match or 2 each and then build more sealed decks. Mm-hmm. And that's just a really good way to get into get the hang of all these things.
I mean, why do you weight that in that way? Like, why do you put more weight on the building of the decks rather than the play?
Because the building of the decks is where you're going to get a ton of your mileage. Because the difference between understanding a sealed format and building a good deck versus building like a medium deck versus building a bad deck is I think bigger than the extra playing time. Because again, I don't want to say that it's not important to play. At the end of the day, we do have to know what we're doing when we're like, we're not blocking 3/3s with 2/2s when we're at 20. And even more than that, we're using our combat tricks nicely. Like we're playing well. But we discussed earlier how much time people have to prepare for these. I'm thinking people have 10 hours to prepare for one of these tournaments.
Okay.
Not 50. Mm-hmm. And if you have 10 hours, spending 5 of it on deck building and 5 of it on playing is way better than spending an hour on deck building and 9 hours on playing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So if you have infinite time, if you're like, I really want to crush this tournament, I want to spend 40 hours. That's great. I've done that. I mean, a lot of the Pro Tours, I spend that much time or more. Like how much did I test for the last Pro Tour? I don't know, 60 hours or something.
Yeah, insane.
So if you have that time, then yeah, spending a lot of those hours playing to really hone your skills is important. That's how people get good. But if you have 10 hours, then a lot of it, I think, should be spent on the deck building part because that's really where you're going to see gains. And a lot of it is figuring out how to budget your time appropriately. And our goal is to give you the best shot with the resources you have, whether they be limited or not. So the check-in for this step for like where should you be at, kind of like when this step is done. And again, this is the biggest step. Like again, if we go back to percentages, it's like step 1 is like 10%. That's just like starting to learn the cards, reading reviews, getting information. This is like 80%. So At the end of this step, you should have played with or against pretty much all the commons or uncommons and have a majority of the set memorized, if not all of it. So you don't need to know every single line of text on every single rare. You should know every line of text on all the commons and uncommons. Maybe the ones that never get played don't matter that much. That's fine too, you know? Like if you don't know the stats on Ethereal Guidance, for example, a card which I've never seen cast.
Right.
No big deal. But you should know what Aim High does. You should know what Silver Strike does. These are cards that you're going to have to play against. You should know what Duskwatch Recruiter does. Mm-hmm. And you only have, a certain percentage of mental energy to devote to any given game. Don't use it on reading card text and trying to remember what cards do. Play enough and build enough decks and look at the cards enough that you know what they do without spending those resources. That's really important.
Yeah, that's really, really important. And anybody who's been to a pre-release after having listened to one of our set reviews will understand, the advantage that you can get from that when you just already know a bunch of the cards and you watch your opponent piecing together how one of the core mechanics of the set works in real time, or, reading a card for the very first time and trying to figure it out while you're sitting there like, man, I knew on day one that this was going to be a good card. And then I listened to the set review and Marshall and Louise said it was a good card. And I immediately put it in my sealed pool because I knew it was going to be a good card. And you know how much further ahead you can be. And this is that same type of feeling. If you just know all the cards and your opponent doesn't, you just have a massive edge on being able to be one step ahead, knowing even some of the little tricks and interactions that aren't obvious at the surface. All of that stuff comes out through this practice.
Right. You start learning common rules interactions or common tricks like Awaken in Battle for Zendikar, knowing you could double Awaken the same land and it would be bigger.
Yes.
Knowing that if you Awaken on one of the rare lands that animate, it gets even bigger.
Yeah.
These are the sort of things that you don't want to figure out on the fly. Magic's so complicated. Why would you try to derive everything, as if you've never seen it before? Some players are good at that. We can talk about how John Finkel, the best Magic player of all time, by the way, shows up at a tournament having not played with the cards and understands what everything is doing because he just reads the cards and looks at them. It's like, these combine in this way.
Yeah, and not to
none
put
of us.
Yeah, and not to put him in the same group, but Kenji Egashira, he's great at that. I've seen him do that multiple times. A lot of times he doesn't even look at the spoiler. He doesn't even want to know. He just wants to figure it out as he goes, and he's good at it. He really is. I've seen him do it at the local pre-releases and on Magic Online as well. It is a skill set. It is something that you can work on and get better at, with practice. And, we don't recommend, making that a goal, right? I mean, but there are some people who can do it, but why not just have that information ahead of time if you're willing to put in the work?
If you've listened to the podcast, then you'll know that we value preparation and kind of figuring out the best way to prepare yourself for what's coming ahead. And that really means doing the most work ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So not at the risk of repeating myself, another theme of the podcast, every game you have a limited amount of mental energy you can expend to it, and I want to save it for the really good stuff. Because you know what the great part about limited is?
What's that?
The situations you find are so novel. They're so new.
Oh, yeah.
This is part of the reason I love limited much more than constructed. Look, I like constructed. I play it. But when you've played 20 games of green-white against Grixis, you don't end up with that many situations on the board that you've never seen before. Mm-hmm. And the skill is trying to figure out how to build your deck and how to navigate those situations once, and then once you have that, you don't have to change all that much. Limited, you play a game of Shadows. Let's say, I played a lot of drafts of Shadows. I guarantee you, if I played a game of Shadows, within a couple turns, I'd have a situation I've never faced before.
Yep.
And that's what I have to figure out. And that's the hard part. But that's what I want to use my energy on. It's not trying to figure out, how Confront the Unknown interacts with Ongoing Investigation. I just know how those two cards work. So
Yeah. I definitely view it similarly. It feels like Constructed is more about execution. Right, where when you're looking at a game of limited, it's much more about figuring out new situations on the fly, which is certainly more mentally stimulating, I think.
Most of the constructed match is determined when both players sit down based on the deck lists, and it's just like, let's just see if what we expect happens in as the games play out. Mm-hmm. Limited, it's much more like, let's play out the games and see what happens.
Yep.
Because that's where all the game is. But in any case, once you're done with the kind of like the majority of your play testing, you should know all the commons and uncommons, have a very good handle on the rares, and know the common color pairs to look for or avoid in deck building and drafting. So, to go back to original Zendikar, if you went to a sealed tournament during original Zendikar, you would be well advised to bring swamps and mountains because there would be none at the land station.
Yes.
There was as many plains, islands, and forests as you could use, but 80% of the people played black-red.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
if you knew that, then you'd have an advantage. And that one was so obvious, everyone figured it out. But if there have been sealed formats where it's like, well, actually, you're white about half the time.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, you're just trying to figure out what the tendencies are and what you should be looking for or look to avoid. So as usual, you don't want to have like a firm plan going in, but it is good to know the kind of like the broad strokes of the format.
Okay. And that is that's the most important. That's the meat of it all, right? That's the thing that you can realistically have a shot at getting down before the tournament goes. And that's going to get you that, you and I talk on the show a lot about like diminishing returns and where you get the most value out of your action. And this is, you're getting a large portion of it from this part of the deal, right?
Yeah, this step is getting you to where you need to go, both in terms of knowing the cards and the format.
Yeah. So it's a big one. Like if you can feel comfortable at this stage with getting this part of the process down, you're going to give yourself a large advantage for sure.
You are, and this last step here is really what's gonna solidify that. So that's step 3, and this is the like fine tuning and review step.
Yep.
So here is where we kind of tackle the rest of the rares and the mythics. So it is unrealistic to assume that you will have played with or against all the rares and mythics.
Yeah.
I haven't even done this in formats where I play a lot of. There's just so many. So what you want to do is you want to seek out the information that there is available. So you can talk to your friends. You can talk to the people you test with your Magic group. You can look at forums. You can read articles. And your goal is to have an idea, at least, of where all the rares and mythics are relative to other cards. Mm-hmm. So this isn't a quiz. This isn't, you need to be able to rank every single card in the set. But what it is you don't want to open a rare or a mythic and have no idea how good it is. Because it's easy to get these wrong. Rares and mythics tend to be complicated. They tend to do strange things. So you don't want to end up in a spot where you're like, well, I don't know how good this rare is. I guess I'll take it over this good common when it turns out that rare is not actually good. Or, well, I know this uncommon is good, so I'll take it over this rare when the rare is just a great card.
Yeah. Interestingly, this is also where the opinions will vary the most, which I find fascinating about it, is that, you'll have people week 1 saying that Startled Awake is, God's gift to Magic players or whatever. And, maybe you play it a few more times and you start to get a feel for it and you realize, well, it has an application in the format, but it's not just a slam bomb, right? And there's many, many aspects of complicated rares because, as we know, R&D lets the reins go a bit when it comes to rares, and they'll do some pretty goofy stuff with them. And it can be very difficult to pin down, really what a good card is on those obscure cards. And there's a lot of them. They're not all, dragons that cost 6 mana, have 5/5 flyers and a bunch of abilities. So some of them are weird, and the timing on them is weird. And, Fevered Visions, cards like this are just hard to pin down early,
How good is Fevered Visions, Gold Knight Castigator, Triska Decaphobia?
Yeah.
Opinions will vary on all those cards. So that's one of the reasons to seek out many sources of opinions as well. So it's good to read Frank Carson's list on where his team ranks every card. It's good to read Paulo's list when his team ranks every card. Those lists do not look the same.
Yep.
But both are lists compiled by professional Magic players testing for the Pro Tour. It's a good source of information. And I also want to emphasize that you shouldn't just take their judgment and decide, well, they're better than me, so they know better. You should use those as data points and apply your logic to them. And sometimes that means, well, I'm not going to test very much, so I'm going to go with what they say, and that's fine. It's good to leverage people who have tested more. But sometimes it's like, well, I've played Gold Knight Castigator a bunch of times. I actually think it's pretty good, even though these guys don't seem to like it. So, and I would advise you to go with what you've experienced.
It's a big part of the show, right? We try to empower you, give you the tools and the knowledge and the expertise to make your own decisions about these things, and we try to give you ours as a baseline from which to start. But yeah, I find that to be something that if you're willing to take that upon yourself during this testing portion and really have some faith in your own evaluations, and be willing to listen to other people but not blindly follow them, you're gonna find yourself getting further and further ahead the more sets come out.
Exactly. And another thing to think about is figure out what your personal leanings are. What are your favorite draft decks? What are your favorite sealed archetypes? Why? Have reasons for these things. Don't be too locked into these. That's what we're trying to avoid. But it's good to know that, I like blue-red a lot. So if there's a close pick between a black card and a red card, maybe I should lean towards the red card.
Yeah.
You should play to your strengths. And being able to know what decks you're most comfortable with is good. Because especially at the end of a preparation session when you're like, well, I didn't have time to draft 30 times. And I ended up just drafting blue-red 5 times, drafting blue-green twice, drafting green-white once, drafting white-black 4 times. So I'm a little more comfortable with white-black or blue-red, and I like those decks. Then that's a fine place to be.
Yeah, nothing wrong with
that. This one, don't want to spend too much time on, but it is worth noting. Logistics. Make sure you have all your stuff. Make sure you know how you're getting to where the tournament is. Make sure you know who you're going with. These are like the common sense kind of things, but the reason I mention them is take care of these in advance so you don't have to worry about them, during the tournament. You shouldn't be worrying on Friday how you're getting to the tournament on Saturday.
Yep.
You should also make sure that you do them in a way that it makes sense. Don't take a red eye or a 5-hour drive, to the tournament on that morning. That's just a recipe for disaster. So,
yep.
In the theme of this episode, you want to remove as much stuff from your plate beforehand as possible. So just make sure that you have all your ducks in a row.
Yeah, and I have to say, just to put a point of emphasis on this, it's a real shame if you take time out of your week and you test and you put in real effort only to squander it because you didn't plan it out correctly and you don't end up making it to the tournament. Or, even more common is, like you said, you end up driving 5 hours on the morning of, and you're so tired that all the stuff you learned doesn't matter anyway because you just can't think straight. This is the easy stuff, right? Just plan it out a little bit further ahead, and it's just it is the kind of thing that can sabotage all that hard work you've done, and that'd just be a real shame.
Yeah. Look, everyone's got different situations. Maybe you have to work till 8 p.m. on Friday, and it's a 4-hour drive to the tournament. That's going to happen. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, we've all done it. I've definitely done it.
Oh yeah, I've taken a lot of red eyes over the last couple of years.
Yeah,
but one good way to increase how well you do in a tournament is by not doing stuff like that. And if you're going to spend 30 hours or 20 hours or 10 hours testing for a tournament, why would you, like you said, kind of waste that by using logistical plan that really disadvantages you.
Yep.
The check-in for this step's pretty easy. It's the format, the cards, you're going to get to the tournament. It's time to crush the tournament.
Yeah, so, crush it. Get in there.
That's really where you should be at the end of the process. You should be confident that you know what's going on. You know what's going on at all different levels, and that's a good place to be. One thing I do want to note, because we talked about preparing for the tournament, you should also be prepared to not do well at the tournament.
Yep.
If you find out there's a Grand Prix coming to your city, in 6 months, and you're like, I really want to do this. This is gonna be my first Grand Prix or my second Grand Prix. I really want to do well at this Grand Prix. The spoiler comes out. You go to the pre-release. You read a bunch of set reviews or listen to them. You and your friends practice. You have got a Facebook group. You Skype on drafts, and then you go 0-4 in the Grand Prix. Yeah, that sucks. It's not fun. Look, I've been there. You need to not get discouraged over much by it. It's good to be, frustrated or disappointed in the sense that, like, if you care a lot, that's what's going to happen. It's good to care a lot, but don't assume one tournament really defines all these things. You've listened to LR. You know that results-based thinking is not a good thing, and the sample size of one tournament is so small. So all you can do is give yourself the best chance to do well in the tournament. You should not assume you will then do well in the tournament or lose your mind when you don't do well in the tournament.
Yeah, that's right. You know what you're doing. You're giving yourself the best shot to do it, and you got to have faith in the process that if you keep doing it over and over, you will see results at some point. But any one tournament, anything can happen. Okay, good. Luis, I've got some kind of rapid fire questions for you. Again, these are practical questions I think that a lot of our listeners would have about how things actually play out. And since you've got so many years of experience testing with all different sizes and types of groups at all different levels of Magic, I thought this would be a good way, for me to kind of be a proxy for the listeners and fire a bunch of questions at you. So here we go. How many people do we need to effectively play test for a tournament?
The minimum I would say is 2.
Okay.
You can go it alone. I don't think that that's unreasonable. There's a lot of resources, again, like the LRcast subreddit, or there's also plenty of communities of Magic players who will talk to you about Magic and would love to do so. And you can play online. So you don't need other people, but I would say I would aim for like the 2 to 4 range is a good group of people to bounce ideas off. And more is fine than that too. But I wouldn't want to get too much less.
This is kind of a weird question, but it is funny that these little efficiencies come up. Do you cut your opponent's deck when you're playtesting?
Nope.
Do you shuffle their deck or cut it?
Neither.
Neither.
When you're playing in a tournament at a competitive, I believe, or above competitive or professional level, you're supposed to shuffle your opponent's deck. And it's just, and I tend not to at casual tournaments, but I would at the other tournaments. It's just, again, best practices, right? Mm-hmm. But when I'm playtesting, I don't cut the opponent's deck. I don't shuffle their deck. Going to your next question, I do allow takebacks. Sometimes when your opponent's going to mulligan to 5 or 4, you just have them mulligan to 6 instead. The goal is to have good games here.
Okay. Yeah. And you obviously trust the people that you're playing with, right?
Yeah. And
you do shuffle, though, the same way you would, right? Your own deck?
I would shuffle my own deck, yeah, because I want to randomize it.
Yeah.
But like, for example, going back to takebacks, the goal is not to win these games. The goal is to learn as much as you can. And if your opponent, in playtesting is like, like take an extreme example. They cast a 3 damage spell on a 4/4 by accident because they don't know it's a new card. You're not going to say like, haha, that sucks, attacking my 4/4. You're like, oh, just take that back.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to happen in the tournament. And if it does, you're probably going to beat your opponent because they're casting, lightning bolts on 4/4s. Mm-hmm. So your goal should be to try to figure out what's going to happen in this game. And I'm not saying that you should always take everything back when it appears to be a mistake. People make mistakes, but in general, you can actually play it a little bit more relaxed. You are both on the same team here.
What about record keeping? Do you bother keeping records of like, archetype match wins, that kind of thing? Or is the sample size just too small to be relevant and you just have to go off of, that kind of feel, logic, experience, intuition that you have?
I would keep track if you think you're going to play enough games, like going back to like Pro Tour testing. Mm-hmm. Some of the teams have a spreadsheet and they're like, well, blue-green went 2-1 in this draft and 0-3 in this draft and 1-2 in this draft. And black-white did this. And at the end, when you do 20 drafts with the same, and you record all the data, that's a lot of data, and that's interesting to look at. In general, I would say you're probably better off not recording it. The average listener should just play the games and try to figure out what you can figure out from those games. Don't try to, because if you have a small sample size, like you said, if you have 7 matches worth of results from black-white, that's just not enough. Okay, black-white went 4-3 or 5-2. What does that mean? Nothing is what that means.
Right. It doesn't mean anything. How do you manage varying skill levels of the players within the group? Usually there's like a best player in the group who ends up being kind of the de facto leader. But, part of testing is improving at Magic. That's what a lot of people are there for, which means that some people won't be as good to start with. Does this hurt testing? Do you have to adjust to it? Like, how do you approach, sometimes you just have players that aren't as good in your group.
Well, part of the reason to have these groups, and one of the things I love about Magic, I've been on both sides of this equation, by the way, is helping people get better and kind of like level up within Magic. That's what this podcast is. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I like doing, so let's say we had a group, and let's say it was like, I was there and let's say I was the most experienced. Let's try to imagine a world where that's the case. And we had someone else who was like medium experienced and someone else who was like somewhat inexperienced. A good way to set it up would be to have the inexperienced player play against the medium player while I watch the inexperienced player. And we talk about the plays.
Okay.
Alternately, you can actually switch the seats where I would be playing and they would be watching me. And again, still talking about the plays, but you can get both sides of it. You can have them make their decisions and then you talk about why you would or wouldn't do that. And you can have you make the decisions and then talk to them about why you did the things you did. And that's the sort of leveling up that applies across tournaments. That's just getting better at Magic. And that's one of the goals of playtesting.
Right.
And when you playtest for a tournament, yes, you want to do well at the tournament. Like we said earlier, you could just do poorly. It's not like you wasted all that playtesting. You got better at Magic. You spent time learning.
Yeah, for sure. How much testing should you aim to do as a group for like one tournament? Maybe let's say some of the local players that are all qualified for an RPTQ that's coming up. Is there like a minimum threshold? Is there a maximum? Like, how would you approach something like that?
This is completely context and person dependent, so I don't have like a firm answer. I would say that if you wanted to give yourself a good chance at winning, you like something like 10 hours is not an unreasonable amount to test for one of these things. I think you can certainly put in more and get more out of it. I wouldn't put in probably like 100 hours, but you want to do enough that, like, let's say it's a sealed tournament, like you'd want to build and at least play some with, I don't know, 5 to 10 different sealed decks, and maybe some of those you just build and don't play, but I wouldn't feel comfortable doing much less than that.
Okay.
It's just so easy to find the time to build like a sealed deck. That doesn't take a ton of time.
Yeah, you can do it on your own. How long is an average test session? And I realize that this falls into that context category, but what I really want to know is, do you find that the sessions are best when you can grind out for a super long one, where you're putting in an entire Saturday of 12 hours, or is it better to break them up into smaller, 2 to 4 hour sessions or something like that?
Well, a lot of this has to do with transaction costs, as in, if people are coming over to my house to do a draft, we're probably going to do 2 or 3 drafts, because you're getting 8 people to drive, walk, run, bicycle over to your house,
swim,
and that takes a lot of time and logistical planning. So I don't want to do like 1 2 hour draft and be done,
right?
But if I'm like firing up, a draft on Magic Online, I'm like, hey, Matt Nass, come watch me draft, and we just Skype. He could be there for 20 minutes, and that would be it, but that would still be good. So a lot of it is how much friction is there in putting these things together. So the more there is, generally the longer you want the session to be. Otherwise, the relative amount of time you spend setting it up versus actually doing it is disproportionate. But in general, like if you had all these options on the table, I would say like a mix of them is good. And if you really want to like get in the zone, I like a solid like 4 hour testing session. I find those to be very productive. A lot of what we do here in like Denver testing for the Pro Tour, because I have some of my coworkers here are on the same team, is they'll come over to my house for like 3 hours after work, and we'll just play Constructed after dinner until it's time to go to bed.
Okay.
And that gives you enough time that you're really getting into it, but not so much that you're like, oh man, I need a break. I've been playing for 6 hours.
Are there predefined roles for each person on a testing group? And if so, how defined and specialized are the roles? And also just, are they important? Is it important to do that?
Well, I'm the demolitions expert. And
I'm the knife specialist.
Yeah. No, not so much. I mean, like to give you an example, like of a team of 12 people, maybe 2 or 3 people have like pretty like obvious roles, like Ben Stark is the guy who we turn to when it comes to limited. But for example, but for the most part, people provide different skill sets and they can't be like wrapped up into one role. Most successful groups, and unsuccessful ones don't tend to last very long or get very much done. Most successful groups have someone who's a planner, have someone who will set things up, who will set up a Facebook group or make sure that, all right, we're meeting here at this time for at this person's house, and I'll bring snacks, or people should bring these things. Having someone who does that is important. Otherwise, things just don't happen, and that usually happens to be me in groups. But that's fine. I like doing that. So, in general, though, people aren't like, this is the beatdown specialist, or this is the blue drafter. It doesn't end up quite like that.
This is kind of a weird one, but I'm sure you've had experience with it. Which, how do you deal with arguments? The ego stuff. I'm the alpha dog, and I'm gonna make you agree with my opinion, or people that once you get an argument going, don't know how to exit the argument without forcing the other person to say, I agree with you, you're right, and they just won't let it die. How do you manage that within a group? Because there's a lot of personal dynamics there, right? Like if 2 people besides you are arguing, like you don't necessarily want to intrude on the argument, but at the same time, it might be useful. Like maybe you're getting a big idea of how these people approach the game and what they can bring to the table. It also might be a complete waste of time where they're just arguing to argue, and you really need to move on and kind of keep the information flowing, and then you get sometimes you get people's feelings hurt. Like things can get, pretty intense when you're testing and when people really care about what's going on. How do you manage that stuff?
What is this, the leadership and regulation podcast?
Jeez, that's a stretch. Stick to the love and relationships, buddy.
Well, yeah, I know where my bread is buttered. It is. This is a complicated question. This is obviously just goes to human nature, and people are all different.
But this stuff does pop up, right?
It does. You want to make sure you're in a collaborative space. Like when I talked earlier about like talking about why you should make a play and what are the reasons to do that when you're talking with someone like let's say who's less experienced. It absolutely is not like, why did you do that? That was a terrible play. You should not say those things. You should be like, well, here's the reason that I would make this play instead, or oh, the play you made is good for these reasons, but here or bad for these reasons. I mean, we're not here to sugarcoat, but do it in a constructive manner. And people who can't do that, it's uncomfortable, but you can talk to them about it. And if you're not comfortable talking to them about it, maybe you have to think of whether they're right for the group or whether you're right for the group that you're in.
Yeah.
And we could go for a lot longer on these, but in general, I just want to say, as long as people have the same goals and a good attitude, usually things are fine. And when those things are less defined, or people are coming from very different places, then you can have trouble.
Okay. Yeah, something to keep your eye on. All right. Well, that will wrap up the main topic there. And we do hope it was useful for you, as there are a lot of gains to be had by grouping up with other people and jamming ideas and getting it all out in the open. And I think that, most of the pros that you talk to will recommend playing with players who are better than you, to improve. So that would be something that's good. But I think that there's a lot to be said for just playing and testing, talking and working things out with players that are your equal, or even sometimes that you're better than, that you can still learn from that and really take yourself to that next step. We talk about things on the show that relate to this all the time, but we thought this would be good to kind of put a bow on it as a concept in general. And I recommend it. I know that, I have never been on a Pro Tour testing team, but I have helped 2 different friends test for Pro Tours. And, it's different. It feels different. It feels more workmanlike. You want to get in there and get your hands dirty and really try to figure this stuff out. And, I got to say you can feel it. You can feel that you're taking a different approach rather than just, I'm going to draft a few times and then go to the tournament. It's different. And, I think you can learn a lot from it.
Yeah. And another thing that is important to kind of keep in mind all this is, first of all, you should be having fun. If you're not having fun, ultimately you're not going to keep doing this, because that's a big part of it. Magic is a game for fun. Mm-hmm. The other is that testing with people and making other people better, like even if you're much better than someone, you get something out of teaching them. You do, and you will get better. And likewise, if someone's much better than you, there's a lot you can learn from them. And kind of what each person's bringing to the table are really valuable to both players, as well as just, this is the sort of thing that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. All right, good stuff, Luis. I want to remind you that Limited Resources is brought to you by channelfireball.com. Make sure you check them out. Eldritch Moon will be appearing, it's coming up pretty quickly here. And, we'll let you know here on the podcast once the pre-orders are available on Channel Fireball. In the meantime, make sure you check out all the awesome free content that you can find there, videos, articles, podcasts like this one from some of the best players in the world, with the goal of getting you better at Magic. We know that that's why you're here, and I know that if you go to Channel Fireball, you will also help meet those goals. That is going to do it for the show this week. If you want to find us on social media, I am Marshall_LR, and Luis is LSV. We're always around to say hi or to answer any questions or take any feedback you might have. Luis and I are very feedback positive people. We like getting feedback. We talk about it amongst each other often, way more often than you might assume. We really do value everything we hear, and don't be afraid to let us know. Also, you can find everything related to the podcast on lrcast.com. That has links to everything in there, the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, the subreddit, all of it. It's on lrcast.com. Thanks so much for hanging out. We'll see you next time.
See, this is why I don't write about my sign-offs in the show notes. You just kind of one-up me here.
What did I do?
Well, I think it actually makes sense to talk about today, since that's kind of what the episode is about. But what I want to talk about, my new favorite word, concept, activity, iteration. Iteration is really been the theme of my year here, and honestly is a lot like the theme of my life. So iteration is the repetition of a process or activity with the goal of getting closer and closer to the correct answer, which sounds pretty simple and maybe doesn't even sound that exciting. But let me tell you, I'm becoming convinced that iteration is really the kind of the secret to success, because no one nails things in one shot, and maybe some people do. But I bet a lot of the people you think have nailed things in one shot actually didn't. You just have seen them at the end of their iteration as opposed to the beginning.
Okay.
I mean, everyone knows that, the best basketball players practice infinite.
Yes.
And everyone knows that the best piano players practice infinite. A lot of the things that you think might look easy, I bet the people doing them also, put in tons of practice. And that's because, from my experience, everything that's worth getting good at is something where you need a ton of iteration to get good at it. Because if it was so easy, then, well, you would just do it and it would be done. And what's the fun in that?
Yep.
So all the things I enjoy are pursuits that take a ton of work in order to be excellent at it. And I'm not saying that, I'm excellent at everything I do. Clearly not the case. But the quest of getting there just
means it kind of is the case. I just thought really quick about the stuff you do, and you're kind of really good at all of it. But I think that actually, lends more to your point than against it. Because I think you do practice what you preach here.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that. That is a very nice compliment.
I had to call you out. I'm like, wait a minute. I know you're good at your job. I know you're good in the booth. You're great at magic. You're good on the podcast. I'm like, what the hell is he? I mean, you're 80% from the elbow at basketball.
Yeah, I have perfected the hook shot. But, you and I had this conversation pretty recently that just being, I wouldn't say obsessed, but being passionate about iteration is a very big strength.
Agreed.
And
yeah.
I couldn't I don't think I would have named that 6 months ago necessarily, but I didn't realize it as we've talked more about it. And the positive iterative process is just so powerful. And so what that means is you want to work with, surround yourself, talk with people who want to do awesome things and who are willing to put in the effort and have the desire to get there. And so you do something. Let's use the podcast for an example.
Mm-hmm.
We record an episode of the podcast. Afterwards, we take the feedback people give us and the feedback we give ourselves because we're here listening. We figure out what was good, what wasn't good. I mean, if you listen to my first couple episodes, they're very different than the ones we do now.
Mm-hmm.
We've changed some of the process that goes into them. We figure out what to change and how to change it. And then you do it again and you do it again. And at the end of it, ideally, you have something that's great. So
yep.
It's just such a good feedback loop too. And both in the terms of actual feedback, as in every time every time I'm in the booth with someone, for example, I'll write them feedback because I think that's I would want feedback, and I think getting feedback is the way you grow. But once you give good feedback and then they do something and they change and then they're better and then you can give them great feedback and it flows both directions and it reinforces itself.
Absolutely.
It's a virtuous cycle of sorts where you do something and then you try to make it better and then it's better and then you want to make it even better and the whole time it feels great. And sometimes, you run into stumbling blocks. Sometimes you do something and it's not good and then you keep iterating and it's not good and you either have to change your tactics or move on to something else. Failure is part of it too. I don't want to paint a picture where everything you do is just immediately successful.
Right.
But it is a very, very powerful tool, especially when you just go out and state it that this is your goals. And that's what I think the big difference is. I did a lot of these things for a long time without really realizing what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Another big part of it, and you kind of touched on it with your last question, was ego. Look, I'm friends with a lot of people who have big egos. I would be willing to believe that I have a big ego because I know I do. But I think there's a difference between positive and negative because having ego during the iterative process is harmful. The whole idea is that people have come up with concepts, ideas, practices, and you get to criticize them. You're not criticizing the person, you're criticizing the idea. And sometimes ideas are bad. You should change them. It doesn't mean you should get mad because someone wants to change your idea. That's exactly the opposite of what you should do. So it's really important to make sure that everyone has, good intentions and everyone is willing to be on the same page when it comes with what you're doing. So I haven't found ego or personality clashes to be particularly useful in that regard.
Yep. In fact, harmful.
Yeah, very, very much so. Because you want to be in a space where you're allowed to criticize when necessary and allowed to give bad feedback or, positive or constructive feedback always, but like good versus bad. Like sometimes you do something and it isn't good and it's actually useful to you to be told that. It's not saying you're a terrible person. It's just saying, hey, the thing you did there, that wasn't good. Like to give you an example, we did Factor Fictions at Grand Prix LA. I thought they were awesome. We would put up a question and the two commentators would weigh in on it. Well, I kind of intentionally did the first take kind of thing where I just picked the opposite of whatever Gabby said. I actually don't think that was good. I think that afterwards we are like, yeah, that didn't really work. We should just argue with what we believe in. And if that means we're both on the same side, so be it.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
That's an example of something which I did, which I think could be improved. And
it's funny, the ego thing goes the other way as well. Because I think normally people think of the ego as being the thing that prevents you from taking criticism to improve. But also, when people give you compliments and you let your ego absorb those too much, you might get a little too comfortable with what you think you're good at when it's actually a place that you need to improve as well. It kind of gets you coming and going. So you could definitely want to try to check the ego if you're trying to just outright improve at things.
So by complimenting me, you're trying to make me complacent and stop me from growing.
No, that is not what I'm doing.
I appreciate that.
That is not what I'm
doing. So a lot of this probably isn't news. A lot of people do this, and this is like one of the concepts we talk about, that you can't get through life without doing some amount of this. But I find it useful to talk about it in just very concrete terms, because this is one of the things that have, I think, led to a lot of the successes that I've found within or without and outside of Magic is the willingness and the desire to iterate. And if it's something that you maybe haven't thought about a bunch, or maybe are frustrated with how things are going, I can't recommend strongly enough that you try this and approach it with an open mind.